We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio-quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to Zencaster.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello, listeners, and welcome to Sisters Assembled, where we are covering the end of Season 1 of X-Men 97, which is crazy. It's been 10 weeks since we did our predictions. Forgot that there was 1 and 2 put together. It's been 10 weeks since we did our predictions. We started our predictions at the beginning of spring. It's now struggling to become summer. It's been a long time, but in X-Men time, it feels very short because every week has been insane, and it's crazy to think that it's coming to an end. We have plenty more X-Men content coming down the pipeline for you, but in relation to straight reactions coming out of an episode, this is the last one. It's the end of an era.
Yeah, man. I can't believe it's been 10 weeks since we were doing predictions already. Like, it is kind of crazy to me that it is the end of May, just about. Or I should say it's like mid-May. It's not the end of May because the end of May is my birthday, so I can't say that yet. But it is May, and like we started this, March?
Yeah, right before my birthday.
Crazy. Well, it had to be before that, though. No, I don't know. I can't count weeks.
No, the first episode came out the 20th, 2 days before my birthday.
Well, predictions, though.
Yeah, but seriously, like, that was a week before my birthday.
Okay. Well, yeah, so we've been doing this for a while, is the point.
Yeah.
But let me just say, hats off, because for the first time ever, a series has gone 10 for 10, in this case, there were 10 episodes, all the way through, from start to finish, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And for, I would say, one of the first times ever, because there were a few, like the Falcon and Winter Soldier, stuck a freaking landing for the first time ever. I'm not walking out of a show being like, well, the rest of it was fine, but actually the ending kind of sucked, and now I don't like the show because I can just keep thinking of the ending. I'm looking at like every show of 2023. Thank you very much. We have had a winner, finally.
Yeah, there were elements I didn't love. I think it was probably my least favorite episode out of all of them, maybe.
This one?
Yeah.
Taylor!
Maybe it's because the others had so much anticipation, and I think this one did a really, really good job of setting up season 2, but I think that there were other episodes that I liked more. And there were except maybe I lied. Episode 4 was my least favorite. But I just thought that there were other episodes that I enjoyed way more. Like, I loved 5. I thought 5 was insane. I thought 6 was good. 7, 8, and 9 were incredible.
I can't believe you're saying this right now. I can't believe we're not aligned.
I'm not saying I didn't like the episode, because I literally had to get dressed in 10 minutes today because I watched almost the entire thing before work, which I don't have time to do in my normal schedule. So yeah, got dressed in 10 minutes because I couldn't stop watching. It was a great episode. But I think about like that period of 5 through 8 as the absolute highlight of this show. Just everything that it was setting up, Genosha, all of it. and just the way that the pieces were falling together. And maybe it's because I don't like endings. Maybe it's because we like got the full resolution. And it's not that it didn't stick the landing. I just think there were pieces that I thought were a little slower. But I think it did a good job of setting up season 2. And I know we're going to get into a lot of that. There were a lot of Easter eggs at the end. The end, when the asteroid exploded, I was on the subway. I literally gasped. My mouth dropped open. It was a good episode. I still think there were better episodes.
I can't believe that we are not aligned on this. I'm shocked. I will say, like, I think there were some other episodes that were a little bit more like on the edge of my chair. I know 5, I genuinely left the episode crying. We all know why. And I think there were a few others. I know 9, like those last 3 seconds were like, what the heck just happened? But for a finale, I thought this from start to finish did everything it had to do. And I liked that there was an unexpected kind of turn of events with the asteroid, because I definitely was thinking, what's next, right? We ended 9 in a place of unsureness, really, like, and I kept saying, since we started, tolerance is extinction, which obviously is 8, 9, 10. And 7 was obviously leading up to it. 7, 8, 9, it was like, I'm seeing the general direction we're going. I don't know how this is going to end. And that's kind of what I kept saying in the blog post too, was it was like, we're filling in the puzzle, but I have so many holes still. I'm not really sure what the picture is. And not in a bad way, but I really was unsure, like, what are we going to see in episode 10? And obviously, episode 9 ended in a way where you're like, crap, our heroes aren't looking too good out here. Things aren't going too well. And so I'm glad they went further than just Bastion then. And there was like multiple layers, and they brought Magneto's storyline along. I just think as a whole, it was a great episode. Like, I was on the edge of my chair watching this thing the whole time. I was like, yes, 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 yes. And then, and we will get to the ending, and we will get to the mid-credit scene, because the mid-credit scene I have been talking about since episode 5, and I was like, it's either going to be the last few I didn't know how they were going to do it, but I was like, it's either going to be the last few seconds of the episode, or they're going to do a mid or end credit for the first time to set up this for season 2. I was like, they have to. I didn't expect the ending with them kind of going everywhere, and again, we'll get into this more in detail, but I was definitely expecting something along the lines of the mid-credit scene, and I was like, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, to what you were saying at the beginning, I too think it did what it had to do as a finale, right? It wrapped up the Bastion storyline, it wrapped up the Magneto storyline, because as we've talked about through most of this season, the main character in this season was Magneto. He was number 1 on the call sheet. It was his story, his evolution. And I think we saw the resolution of that to this point. There's some things that it hinted at for the future, but I definitely did a good job wrapping up a lot of storylines, moving things forward, setting things up for season 2. I think we should just start to get into some of the details, because there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack, a lot that was set up, a ton of cameos. I mean, it was kind of insane. I also think there were some interesting callbacks to like previous storylines. Obviously, we saw the Phoenix come back in this storyline. We saw Asteroid M come back in this storyline. I mean, we saw it in episode 9 as well. But even the same idea of like, do they blow up Asteroid M? Like, that was a little bit from the past, which I think maybe that's where I struggled a little bit, is I was like, oh, we've done this Asteroid M thing before. I do agree, like at the end they kind of saved it for me, where they like went off into multiple different times along the timeline. But I do think like that's one place where I was like, ooh, okay, we're doing the Asteroid M storyline. Like, we've seen this before. Even a little bit with the Phoenix. I was like, oh, the Phoenix is back. Like, yes, these are iconic storylines, but also at the same time, we've seen them, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the Phoenix would come back. I think I covered that in a blog post, because you could tell they were outnumbered, is not the word, outpowered maybe is the word, or the phrase at least. You could tell Bastion had one up on them. I mean, that's how episode 9 ended. So I did see the Phoenix making an appearance. I liked that it was brief, and it was just kind of like to the point, where it helped take out the Prime Sentinels. And it was like, okay, chess piece removed from the story. Awesome. Now we don't need to focus on them anymore. So I did like that, because it was quick and easy, especially because what episode was it? 7 or 8, where the Prime Sentinels were activated. And we kind of already saw them. We saw the fight with them. So I didn't feel like we needed to do the whole fight with them again. So I appreciated that was like a quick little, like, what did Staples used to have? Like the easy button? Like,
Yeah.
that's what it felt like. On the other end of it, you were kind of saying with Asteroid M, I get it. I think I was a little confused at first when Magneto last episode like pulled a rock out of the ocean, because I was like, dude, didn't we cover this? And it was a little different because obviously he didn't have mutants up there. The only people up there, well, the only person was him and then Rogue and Sunspot who joined him. But there was no one else versus originally, obviously, it was the Haven, and maybe that's the intention of where it was going eventually, but that's not what happened yet. I did kind of feel that last episode, but knowing it was already in the story, I just was like, well, they have to do something different with it, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think I thought less about it last episode because there was so much going on. And then this episode, when it became a storyline of like the Magneto protocol, that's when I was like, this feels familiar. And that's where I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's probably my bigger complaint. And I was like, oh, like we've kind of seen this done already. And like I said, the way that they kind of saved it for me was at the end when they were dispersed, and we will definitely talk about everything that set up because that was huge and basically gave us our biggest hint at what we're going to look at next season. But I think up until that point, it was kind of nagging at me that I was like, all right, this feels for the first time like we're a little bit too much leaning on the original series instead of building off of it.
I see the concerns, and I definitely at one point felt a little bit of it, but I think the asteroid part really came in clutch for this episode. Because if we look at it as a whole, the battle was always going to be with Bastion. And let's just talk about him for a second here, because I don't know what he was going through. Metamorphosis. I'm not really sure what was happening to that man, thing, robot, but he was leveling up.
So it's interesting you say that because I also was confused, but I want to provide a point of clarity. Apparently, Cable's arm had the techno-organic virus in it. And when he like absorbed that kind of helped him like level up, because isn't that exactly what made him who he is anyway? Like his dad was infected by that when he was created.
Yes.
So I think that was kind of what helped there, was that was already living in Cable's arm.
Okay.
And that's why he took his arm, which was very Bucky coded, I'll say.
I definitely felt a little triggered during that moment. I'm not going to lie. I felt Civil War coming out of me. And I was like, something hurts. And let's just say, you hurt me in episode 5 with the Wanda callback. You're hurting me in episode 10 with the Bucky callback. Like, let's bring some peace to Katie. Okay. I could use some peace. You already killed my favorite character in this series, although we'll get to that in a second. Haha. But yeah, I understood the arm was part of it, but I really wasn't following the level up. I was just like, what is going on? But as I kind of said, I like the idea that the Phoenix came in and was the one who was able to put this. I don't want to call it a power neutralizer because it really didn't do that. It severed his connection with the Prime Sentinels. He still obviously had his abilities, but I'm going to call it that for the time being. It's just easier to say. Made sense. I liked that. And I like that he wanted to go after Asteroid M, because I think that brought another layer to, like, if you looked at it from the human perspective, which they showed, and I appreciated that, it's like, Magneto's up to no good. Magneto's about to drop an asteroid on us. Oh no. And it's like, actually, the only reason this thing's coming down is because of Bastion. Like, it was very interesting because we're seeing the behind the scenes. It was almost like behind the curtain. And we know that Bastion has this whole plan because he's like, pretty much screw humanity. I'm the next step of evolution. I am who I am, like whatever. And that's where he reaches the end at the end of this episode, is he's pretty much like, screw everyone, right? But the humans don't see that. And I think that's so interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely very much one of those stories that the story you understand depends on the perspective at which you're hearing it. So to your point, if you're just a regular human, you're like, deja vu, I've seen this before. Magneto's got an asteroid. Like, here we go. Very much like what you and I were just
this
saying.
time he's trying to drop it on us instead of having it be a haven.
Yeah, like this time he's PO'd, and this time he's using it as a little bit of a baseball, and that is a bummer instead of it being like a little world. So that's the human perspective. The mutant perspective is, okay, we just got kicked while we're down, and now there's like these super robot people who want to hate on us and kill us, and that's even worse than the genocide that we just went through, because this is sustained and targeted, and is basically like literally meant for our extinction. So the mutants are like, oh man. And then they're like their hero, Magneto, who's still alive, who they thought that was going to help them after he, EMP'd the world. He's just out there on this asteroid, and they're like, can we come on the asteroid? And now the asteroid's under attack. So that's the mutant perspective. And then I can't even talk about Bastion. He's just bonkers. He's just like not even living life in like any sense of reality. His entire hatred towards Professor X is based on a lie, which is just like, I mean, I get it. That's a really good motivator, right? Like his mother told him a lie at a young age, and he's used it to build this rhetoric of hate his whole life.
Which is fair, but I have to say, once I've learned it was on the lie, like once that kind of came through and then they were trying to tell him, I'm going to be honest, that might have become the weakest part of the episode for me, because it very much felt reminiscent of like an Iron Man villain. I don't know how to say that in any other way than just the fact of everything he's done, everything he's built, the reason he's been moving forward with the plans he's had is built off of a lie, a single lie. And I guess like I was like, I understood your motivation. I understood it. But when it wasn't true, I was like, wow, like you went through all this and it's not even real.
I also was confused though, because to me, the more compelling motivation for him was that his biological instinct from the Sentinels was to kill mutants. He was born that way.
Right. Well, that's what I thought too. And that's what I mean. Like, I feel like that created, and I don't even think I thought about it until this episode when they pretty much were like, you were fed a lie. Like, this isn't true. Professor X came for you. Like, he was there. He wanted to help you. You could have been one of us. And I think he even at one point is like, really? Like, I'm trying to kill you and you're trying to brainwash me. Like, what is you're trying to recruit me. And I think it's interesting because I do think that was the weakest part of the episode. I think he almost lost interesting motivation to me because, to your point, he was pretty much programmed. He had pieces of Nimrod and Master Mold, and he was created by both of these entities that are meant to absolutely obliterate mutants. That made sense to me. And I think they were maybe trying to appeal to his humanity and his emotion. I just think in this case, actually would have preferred the surface level of, no, I was just born to hate you, more than, oh, actually, like, my mommy told me a lie, but I didn't know it was a lie, so I've hated you my whole life because of it. Like, I think that just, again, fell into, like, an Iron Man level villain, where it's, like, very surface level, very, like, it didn't make you a compelling villain by the end.
No, it's like his whole plan was hatched because he was rejected as a child, which, don't get me wrong, like rejection hurts, especially when you're a kid and you can't really like understand it. Bummer that his mom chose to put that on him. Like, now it makes me look at his mother a little differently, even though she was kind of nuts anyway. I was kind of questioning, like, did she really believe in what he believed in, or did she just have the programming? Which we knew she had the programming, but was that the programming speaking, or was that her true beliefs? Now we know that's probably her true beliefs, because she lied to her son that Professor X didn't want him when Professor X obviously came to recruit him. But to your point, I think it was more interesting to go the biological instinct route, because that's so different from anything that we've seen.
Yeah.
He was literally born to kill them. That is his sole purpose, based on the programming that came from his father's infection. That's interesting. It's new, it's nuanced, versus something we've seen before of, I was rejected as a child, or you didn't accept me, which again, fine motivation. It's been done before.
Yeah, and I also think it made it weak because his whole thing was, I'm the next step of evolution kind of thing. And then, okay, so I should say this whole section was not my fave by the time we're on Asteroid M and he's about to get crushed by Beast in the Sentinel, because then Storm and Cyclops, and I understood the messaging. I got it. It's powerful messaging to sit there and be like, we're becoming the monsters that we've been running from, essentially. I understood the messaging, and I don't think that the messaging itself was the problem. I just felt like it was a strange twist. And I think, again, this comes down to, let's look at the OG series. A lot of these villains, I don't want to say they're one note, but they're very like, ha ha ha, I have one purpose. Like, look at Mr. Sinister. He has literally kidnapped Jean 17 million times. we still eat it up every single time. He does it a little differently, and we're like, oh, look at him go. Look at Mr. Sinister go. He's kidnapped her. Who knows what he'll do? Like, it's crazy every time. Apocalypse, kind of the same vibe. Like, he's always, something's going crazy with him. Surface level, not super, like, emotional. So I think I understood the idea of making a villain that you could kind of see the emotional level to. You could see how you could tell a story through them. And I think that was the whole thing with Storm and Cyclops being like, we're trying to do what the humans have been doing to us, and that's pretty much make him extinct. Like, we're trying to stop evolution or say that, like, we should be accepting, but we're not accepting of him. Blah, 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 blah. I get the point. I just don't think it worked.
I agree. I agree on a couple of levels. One, I think it doesn't work because he is violently antagonistic. Like, I think that makes it difficult to accept anyone, right? So, like, I get that the whole point is he's the future, he's the next step in evolution. Sure. If he was just a normal person who maybe did get raised by Professor X, or even was just able to live a normal life where he wasn't, I mean, I have to think he was radicalized a little bit by his mom because she clearly had her own strong beliefs already. He is the bad guy here. Like, he isn't a good person. He is a villain. You can accept someone who is just different, but they're not a bad person. That also just is a challenge, right? I think to have them make this grand statement, which I think, to your point, the message itself is important. I agree with the message of just because they're different doesn't mean they're bad. But, like, the problem is Bastion is bad. Like, objectively, he's a bad person. So he's not necessarily, like, the proper recipient of that message.
Yes. And I think it really upset me too, because I'm like, are we all forgetting Genosha? Because that's exactly what you're saying. And I totally agree. He is a bad person. Just because he is different, that's not the issue. The messaging I understood, and as we're both saying, it was great messaging. However, you can't use it on a villain. You just had us all watch murder hundreds of mutants. Probably even more with his prime sentinels that he set on them, which is also taking over humans. Plenty, I'm sure, were not willing, because let's be real, he had way too many, in my opinion, to have, like, managed to get them all to be willing.
At least I would like to think that not that many people are that hateful.
Well, my big thing in that is, like, when he had his whole town, I'm like, there's no way an entire town, there's not at least one person who doesn't agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. So to me, I was just like, it's in the water supply. Like, he just put it out there and that's how he did it. That's immediately what I thought of. But you cannot make me see this villain and then suddenly be like, wait, we're like the humans because we're not accepting him because he's different. No, that's, like, not the problem. You should be fighting him and not, I don't want to say not accepting him, but pushing against him because he has literally been part of and planned a genocide and executed it. He has been trying to kill mutants left and right. That is what he's been doing while weaponizing humans as well. And that was also a weird thing we'll get to in a second. But that is a completely different line. And I just feel like it got written in there for, like, a little 30-second thing to try and really tell an extra part of a story that I just didn't feel like it was there. So it was just sticking out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. And my other problem with that whole, like, 180 in how they were treating him is, like, Cyclops literally tried to, like, wipe the face of the earth with Bastion's body parts.
No,
like,
literally.
There's just, like, a little bit of a lack of continuity there. He was like, you just killed my family. Or, like, seriously, you maimed my son. You and your colleague made him kill my wife. I guess they're calling each other husband and wife now, so I think we can safely say that. But you made him kill my wife. You took my son's arm. The only reason you look like that is because that's my son's arm that you're wearing. So he was rightfully so very angry. He watched him, murder come after. He didn't actually murder any of the X-Men, but come after the teammates and chosen family that he's had for years. At least not in this episode. He didn't murder any X-Men. I see your face.
I'm like, there's a very dead X-Man.
Yeah. I meant specifically in episode 10, he did not actually end anyone's life. So I totally, like, to me, his rage is justified. He, like, absolutely flew off the handle. So you're telling me that he goes from flying off the handle 5 minutes ago to, you should become one of us. It's all a lie. It didn't land.
No, I agree. And actually, it wasn't until we started talking about it that I realized I had an issue with it. But it was because it was like, what are those like compliment sandwiches where you have to say like one good thing, something bad in the middle, and then like you say one other good thing. And so the person like walks away with the feedback, but they don't feel bad about themselves. That's what it felt like now that I'm thinking about it. Like, I enjoyed every other part of the beginning. Then this happened and it was weak. But then I ignored it because then the ending happened and that was strong. So I wasn't really thinking about it. I definitely think I didn't love the ending of Bastion.
I don't think he's dead.
Well, I mean like the ending in this case of how the story was told. I don't think I loved the ending there. Then he got sucked out of the asteroid. Okay, he probably will make an appearance to what you were saying. I can see him coming back. I'd be intrigued to what capacity. Like, I can't see him being an X-Man, So, like, what else is he going to do? Is he going to continue being a villain? I don't know. But I do want to bring up very briefly the Prime Sentinels, because we've been asking since their start, since we first learned about them, which I think was episode 7, are the humans still good? And I guess so. Like, as soon as Bastion's connection to them was severed, it seemed like everybody just went back to normal.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I kind of blacked out at that part. Like, I don't know if it just like
Well, it
felt
was
so
brief.
Yeah, it was. I think it was just like it felt so unimportant in comparison to everything that was already happening, because it's like it totally is important. Don't get me wrong. Like hundreds of, if not hundreds of thousands of people being zombified by technology and nanotechnology is horrifying and awful. And it's definitely important to figure out whether or not they came back. But I think I was just like processing so much that I just didn't even realize that that was like answered in a very subtle way, possibly.
Yeah, I think for me, I just needed a better answer. Even if it was like Beast being like, and obviously with the way this episode ended, I understand we weren't going to get this. But even if it was Beast in his little laboratory being like, in 3 to 4 weeks, I will have figured out how to properly take out the nanotech. Like, great, amazing, I'm good. But it was just kind of strange because I wasn't sure what the connection had. I mean, obviously I knew Bastion had activated them. Does the nanotech still exist in them? I would have to think it does.
Yeah, I think it probably does. I think I'll be curious, and I'm hopeful that what they do is address it in season 2. I think the good thing knowing that there is a second season, well, one, they're not, actually that's not true. We do have Forge and Bishop in the present day of X-Men 97. So maybe they will address, it clearly had been some time had passed because of, Forge saying he looked for them for weeks. So I could see it being a throwaway line between those two guys where one of them's like, oh yeah, and all the people who recovered from being a Prime Sentinel. Like, that's really all I need, to your point, is just saying like, yeah, everybody's fine.
Yeah. I just need something brief and then I'm happy, because I was like, I'm really quite concerned. We all know this has been a hyperfixation for me with the Prime Sentinels. I need to understand what happens here. So I really would like an answer. That needed to happen, and I needed to at least put that out in the world, that please in season 2, just one line it. I just want to know what actually happened to these people. But flipping over to, let's say, Magneto. Let's go, because Asteroid M itself is not obviously the villain of the second half of the episode, although to the humans below, it felt like it.
I was gonna say, to the president of the United States, he felt a little differently, apparently.
Yeah, but really we have Magneto. Now, we talked a little last episode about, Professor X going into his mind. I know in the blog, I talked about the possibility of Onslaught coming in season 2, which is still a possibility, although it's definitely would be buried, I think, with what they've already set up for season 2.
I could see it laying dormant until 3, actually.
Yeah, I could. Well, and actually, funny fact is in the comics, it does lie dormant until it eventually is able to become its own being.
Yeah.
So yes, I could see the same thing. Pushing that aside, we obviously spend a lot of time in Magneto's mind, and I think it's really interesting because we've talked about this has been Magneto's season. He has run this season, whether you want to believe that or not. It's just true. He has simply been I don't want to say protagonist, but he's been the driving character through everything. Through all of his attempts to be better, through surviving Genosha, through being a prisoner again, and then obviously trying to go to war against humanity. He's played the role. He's played all of them. I loved the way that they ended this, because I hope it means Magneto actually might be a good guy in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think maybe I'm just so angry at Professor X that I think it kind of clouded how I felt about all of those scenes inside his head because all I could think about this whole time was how much he was manipulating Magneto
True.
the whole time. And I think part of that is because after last episode, I was like, my guy is crossing lines. Like, he is not the guy that we thought he was, or at least the way that I think growing up, we all were like, Professor X, he's this amazing, benevolent guy. No, he's a human. And by that, I mean, he makes mistakes and he crosses lines. And I think I came into this episode with that mindset. And so I didn't love those scenes inside Magneto's head because, especially after he shatters his psyche and he's rebuilding Magneto, it just felt like he was like feeding him very specific pieces of information and cherry picking exactly what he wanted him to remember so that he was remembering a very specific narrative that wasn't totally false but wasn't really the truth either, and that made me very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree. Even down to not saying who he was, to not have him remember him initially, it definitely felt a little weird. It was interesting to me to go off track for 1 second, then come back on, going inside his mind and what it looked like, how tumultuous it was. And what really was intriguing to me was who was inside his mind. Because, okay, Rogue's there. Listen, I'm throwing that one out. That's not the most important person that was on that boat, in my opinion. And if that's the only person you saw, you weren't looking hard enough. Because his two kids, aka Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, were in that boat. And so is Lorna. And this is only important because Lorna is actually, or Polaris, you might know her as well. She's Magneto's daughter, another child of his. We have not actually seen her in the OG series, or if we have, they never confirmed that she was Magneto's daughter, although her presence in his mind clearly probably states that he's aware of her. So it's kind of interesting who else was on that boat, but also, again, that he felt like he was surrounded by water that was always trying to come in and ruin him and end him. And the people he loves is on this boat fighting for their lives just as much. That was very interesting. But to get us back onto the track that we were on, I didn't like Professor X in this episode. I haven't liked Professor X since he's come back.
Agreed. 100%.
I think he is Magneto's oldest friend. And out of everybody, yes, he, regardless of being the one who has the abilities to go into his mind or not, should have been the one to speak to him. Yes, I 100% believe that. However, to your point, I saw him as very manipulative, and I saw him as forcing Magneto to try to believe his messaging. I don't want to say that Magneto's way of going about things is right. I agree with his messaging 100%. If they were to go to war, I would have backed him. But I think at this point, they're desperate, and I understand there's other factors that you have to bring into the conversation. If this just came down to whether I would choose Magneto and his way of whatever he's planning to do here or nothing else, I'd choose Magneto. However, you have Bastion, you have the Prime Sentinels, you have other elements that you must consider, and that's what kind of changes the story. But I definitely agree. I didn't like Professor X really trying to get into his brain and make him not remember his own decisions, really, and his own thought process.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was so icky to watch him try to change Magneto's entire value system while he was vulnerable. And that was not a good look. I was sitting there and I was like, ooh, I don't even feel good watching this. Like, I'm literally watching you manipulate this dude when he can't even remember who he is. Gross. I'm sorry, but that's gross. And we talked about last episode how Scott had a moment of lack of faith, I guess you could call it, in Professor X when he watched him attack Magneto's mind. I can only imagine what Scott would have thought watching him manipulate Magneto at his lowest point.
Well, especially because last episode, he wasn't sticking to the script. Because the whole thing was they knew that he was probably, if they couldn't get Magneto to listen to reason, they knew he probably would have to go into his mind. I think the thing was, and what really with Scott, the moment that frustrated him and really made him see Professor X differently was, and we keep talking about other factors, it wasn't just Magneto's EMP that needed to be undone. Undoing that too early brought the Prime Sentinels back, as we saw. There were other people's lives at risk, and I think that was the first time Scott was seeing Professor X make almost a selfish decision. because he wasn't realizing that there are way too many other factors at hand here. And I do agree, if he was in Magneto's mind there with them, I don't think he would be happy with how he's seeing Professor X handle the situation. I also think you have to consider, let's go back to the OG series. Professor X is known for going into his students' minds and trying to help them through things. Well, we just saw him try to help Magneto through something. So I definitely think from an outside, or I guess from our perspective of actually being inside while everybody else is outside, there's definitely a level there of, what have you been telling all your students? Because Rogue even said it last time, or last episode, I believe, when she was saying, we're more than just your students, or something along that line, because that's true. They're people, which I don't think Xavier always remembers.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought that up, though, because it is important to remember how he goes into their mind. He considers that like treatment, like basically his version of therapy, like therapy with a telepath, which is like invasive and horrible. And like truly, that seems like my worst nightmare. But anyway, that's his version of like recuperation. We actually watch him do it with Sabretooth unsuccessfully. It doesn't seem as intrusive with Sabretooth, but at the same time, Sabretooth is kind of a interesting dude.
He also doesn't know him as well, which I think is another factor.
Yeah.
There's a lot riding on when you have a relationship with somebody, especially if you want to use what you do know about them against them to get them to change their minds.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a good point. And it just, I think, makes it worse that he's like using their trust, their, relationship against them. I don't know. I hate to say it because he's such a classic and iconic character, but Professor X gives me the ick. Like, he just does.
No, he does. And maybe some of that's because I keep thinking about what he looked like in the OG series, and he was so strange looking.
Patrick Stewart?
Yeah, like, why couldn't they animate this bald man properly? Like, nothing looked right.
I'm so sorry. I was thinking the original, like, live action series. I was like, that man is iconic. What is wrong with you?
Oh.
No, you're right. He was definitely odd looking in the original series.
Like, he didn't look right. He honestly, every once in a while, they animated him exactly like what that. Oh, what's that one version of Squidward? What?
No, he kind of looks like Caillou.
It's like if Caillou and that like. Oh, there's a version of Squidward that like when he looks like all posh, and I can't think of his name, like what he's called. But for those of you who know SpongeBob, you're going to understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes he looks like that. And it's very strange to me. And I think that threw me off from the get-go. And then like he didn't get better in X-Men 97. Like they were like, budget goes to Magneto.
Literally.
We got to draw in Xavier in the last few episodes. Crap. Like it just seemed like that's how that went. I'm not complaining, naturally. But yeah, I don't love him. I hope to see maybe moving forward, they write him a little better again, and I get to kind of feel like, yay, Professor X again. But I really do feel and like Magneto a lot more. I liked going the different direction with having Magneto being in charge of the X-Men. So I don't know, I was enjoying the season for that reason. As for Magneto, to kind of go back full circle to what I was saying, could we be seeing Magneto be a good guy moving forward? Is that what happens next? Is he choosing the X-Men as family, as Professor X was trying to explain?
If I had to go out on a limb, here's what I'm going to say. Because he was manipulated, I do think we're going to get a few episodes where he is a full-fledged member. I'm going to cherish and love those episodes, but Magneto is who he is. He's had the traumas he's had. He's lived the life he's lived, and his value system is his value system, regardless of whatever Professor X did inside his mind. And at one point, he's going to return to his true essence, his most authentic self, and he's going to realize what the heck happened inside his mind, and he's not going to be happy.
I actually think it's down to where we ended this episode. We ended this episode in the perfect way to allow Magneto to be part of the team. In another time, there will come a day where they have to come back to the present. And I think that's actually when we'll see it, when he has to return and he also has to face everything that's happened, because it's not lost on me the irony of the situation. They have a literal Magneto protocol in place for him rebuilding Asteroid M, essentially. And on top of that, he's the one who saved it. Like, they brought it down. The humans brought it down. Magneto's the one who saved everybody. That irony is not lost. But that's not how that story is going to be told. And so I think him having to come back to once again being what they called him at the very beginning. He's a terrorist. He's the villain. He's the bad guy. I think that might be the moment, because right now it's going to be all like sing song butterflies when they can be a team together in a different time. But that's when nobody knows who Magneto is.
Yeah, I think it's actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it very much parallels the larger conversation of this season, which is, oh my gosh, mutants like Professor X, martyr, he died, that's awful. And there's a sense of unity, right? We saw that. We talked about it in the first few episodes. Then Genosha happens. Then there's this almost level of fatigue for sympathy against mutants, as if, you know, a genocide could make you fatigued against empathy for a group of people. Ugh, gross. But it's true. That's what we watched happen. And then Professor X comes back and he lied. It's revealed that they all lied. He didn't die. So that whole idea of unity was a lie. This is the exact same scenario. The idea of him believing in Xavier's mission is a lie. They're probably going to face some horrible stuff. Then he's going to have to come back and it's going to be revealed what the lie was, because he's going to recognize, wait, I wasn't with you this whole time. You're not my family. You're my freaking enemies. Look at the news coverage. Look at the newspapers. We're not on the same side. Again, Xavier's gonna get caught in a lie and it's gonna cause a freaking world war because this man is a liar.
Yeah, I definitely think it'll be an interesting dynamic. And I like that they're driving the show possibly through these two, because I think it's very important to do so. They are the most prevalent, I would say, because they really start it all. But it would be wrong of us if we didn't leave enough ample time to go over the last few moments. So right before we do that, just want to say, Cameo Fest, man. Daredevil, Cloak and Dagger, T'Chaka, Cap, Iron Man, who both were protecting the president. Seemed a little weird on that one. They're never on the same side of that coin, so that felt a little off. Who else am I missing? Oh, Doctor Strange.
Well, we saw Peter and Mary Jane from Spider-Man the Animated Series. Okay, I'm not going to lie. Cloak and Dagger was my favorite. I was so excited when I saw them.
Yeah, they were at first. I'm glad they showed them, I think, twice, because the first time I didn't know who they were. But yeah, I did. I actually didn't peg Peter Parker, but I did see MJ.
That red hair, it's eye-catching.
Yeah, I was like, wait a second. I know that outfit. Like,
Literally.
that's what came to mind. But yeah, she was there. Who else? We already talked about the children of Magneto on the boat. Sauron, Morph made an appearance as Sauron and as Mr. Fantastic, so those were both there. We saw quite a few mutants, including Psylocke. We also saw Omega Red make another appearance. He already made a cameo already in the show. And last but not least, another one we saw make a cameo before, but make one now, is Silver Samurai, which is interesting that we've now seen him twice, because he is related to Wolverine. He is a Wolverine villain. So let's keep that in our minds. Get better, Logan.
Poor guy.
Did I not say that? I was like, he's going to miss the best battle. And then he did. Like, we saw that coming.
He would love to rip some Bastion to shreds.
Oh, he would have been living his best life.
Yeah.
Also, gonna wake up. Where is he?
Yeah, we don't actually see him at the end, do we?
No. And I'm pretty sure he was up there with them all.
He was on the asteroid.
Yeah, the only ones, well, Jubilee and Sunspot are down on Earth, aren't they? Hold on, that got fuzzy.
Yeah, they were on Earth. But then I was confused because I was reading an article and it was like the only X-Men still on Earth are Bishop and Forge. And I was like, but what about Jubilee?
Which can't be true, though, because now that I think about it, we never saw them in the other times.
Right.
So they're on Earth.
But like, what are they doing?
Unless they're not being considered full X-Men because they're like the B-team youngsters.
Boo. I think they proved themselves. They went up against Bastion.
Yeah, I think so too. But we could go and do a whole other episode with like who's who and where and everything else. We won't do that right now. Let's get into the ending. We could go into Jean and Scott. I'm going to be honest, and this is up to you, T, but I'm going to be honest. That was my least favorite part of the ending. I really didn't care. I was like, congratulations, you found Nathan in the future.
It was, but I'm gonna info dump super fast, rapid fire.
That's fine.
So, Clan Ascani. Interesting. We are now in the future. They are a group that fights against Apocalypse in the future. So, fun fact, they're actually led by Rachel Summers, another Summers child. But this one is Scott and Jean's daughter from another timeline. So, that's Rachel. So, she's kind of with her brother, sort of. They are big people who keep the sacred timeline going. I saw that in an article and I actually almost died. I was like, we're back to this. Cool. Great. Sacred timeline. My favorite topic. But yeah, so that is Clan Ascani and Mother Ascani, definitely interesting. What I thought was most fascinating, and this kind of goes through all pieces I think we're going to talk about today, is the article mentioned, oh, we're now seeing Apocalypse in 3 different time periods.
Mm-hmm.
Hello to our main theme of season 2. Welcome to the board.
Yeah, I'm glad you just info dumped, because when I was doing my research, I was only looking at when they went into the past, and obviously I didn't have to do my research for the mid-credit because I did that research 5 episodes ago. But yeah, I was only thinking surface level on that one, thinking, oh, cool, they're with Nathan. They found Nathan in the future. I'm super glad you kind of delved into that a little bit more, and also for any of those who also weren't as aware, because that's a very good point to sit there and now say, oh, they actually all tied to Apocalypse, which I didn't know. So that's cool. I thought personally the really cool one, because again, I was expecting the mid-credit, not necessarily as a mid-credit, but I was expecting it, was the ending with them all going back in time to Egypt. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this one, so let's get into it. So the guy that they kind of quote unquote save at the end is actually Ensabah Noor. He says his name. They call him Noor for short everywhere I've been seeing, so I will refer to him as Noor. He is Apocalypse, but he's like baby Apocalypse. He's Apocalypse before he becomes Apocalypse. There's a lot of lore here, but I want to say the most important thing is he exists in Egypt during Rama-Tut's rule. And if that sounds familiar, my friends, that would be because that's a Kang variant that goes back to ancient Egypt, and the Fantastic Four eventually also end up there fighting him. And actually, Apocalypse fights him as well. And funny enough, or I should say Noor, he's not Apocalypse at this point, Kang, aka Rama-Tut, actually goes back initially because he knows Apocalypse is one of the most powerful mutants by his time, and he goes back to try and raise him as a child to pretty much be his successor. This doesn't go as planned for him. Noor tries to eventually kill him. It's a whole thing. He flees back to the future, and then Noor goes on. The more of his mutant abilities come out during all of this, and eventually he becomes Apocalypse, but he lives through all of this time, so I'm not going to bore you with all of that. But him being in Egypt is probably the most important part of the entire story and everything that happens while he's in Egypt.
Well, I went deep on Clan Ascani, and you went deep on baby Apocalypse. I did not realize the connection to Rama-Tut. Man, ancient Egypt, what a time. I wonder how much this relates to like the gods of Egypt that we've also seen. Like, obviously it's not going to be the Mark Spectors, but like they probably have their idols, or I forget what they call them, their people who they inhabit or give powers to. So just, I don't know. I feels like a lot of streams are crossing in ancient Egypt, or just like in Egypt in general. And so I think that's super interesting. It makes me wonder, like, are they ever going to cross this over? Because there's just too much at this point.
Yeah.
That just feels right. And like the idea of like sacred timelines and like all of this stuff, I'm like, oh, you are dangerously close. And not that I don't want it to tie into live action, it would just make my brain hurt to try to meld it in at this point.
Yeah.
But like they're getting dangerously close to really big vocabulary or important vocabulary and times and places and people that we have studied extensively on this show.
Oh, yeah. Trust me. I read Rama-Tut and I looked him up, because I was like, we can't be talking about the same guy I'm thinking we're talking about.
There's got to be a different Rama-Tut.
Yeah, I was like, it has to be somebody else. And obviously Google confirmed I was correct. And keep this in mind, guys. We saw him at the end of Quantumania. Now, obviously, Kang and that whole direction, not really sure that's even happening fully anymore. But we did see him at the end of Quantumania. Like, this isn't just a random variant. No, like this is one of the ones they brought in and we specifically saw. So it's very interesting to me that they already have this past with each other, but that we're back in that exact time frame, essentially. That will be very interesting to me to see, to your point, how they kind of walk that line, because they're getting very close to prevalent stuff too. It's not just, oh, maybe reference to something that happened in phase 2. Oh, maybe reference to something that happened early phase 4. No, this is like actually current, could happen in the next few years if we continue the Kang storyline. Like, this is prevalent. Also, now that I'm talking out loud, let's remember this show was probably already mostly done before all the Kang stuff or all the Jonathan Majors stuff. So if this was going into any sort of direction of overlap, they probably kept it as is. They probably weren't too worried about sitting there and redoing all of it when they weren't sure what was happening with Jonathan Majors. So I'm just going to throw that out there as well.
Two things coming off of that. One, I think it's also important to recognize, and you pointed this out, the Fantastic Four are involved. Obviously, if you've listened to our most recent Sister Scoop, you know that we are fully on our way. I mean, we all know it, but like now we're starting to get real casting information and tons of stuff about the Fantastic Four. So they're coming, and we think for possibly another universe based on the rumors that are coming out.
But I also want to point out there clearly has to be a Fantastic Four in this universe because Morph turned into one of them.
Yep. Yes. So it all ties together. And then all that to be said, it makes me wonder if, knowing that we're getting a full live action X-Men, they're going to go the Miles Morales route, which is watching us go from animation to live action with this exact team.
Because time jumps are clearly not a problem.
Time jumps are not a problem. I think everybody is pretty much landed in the camp that we're going to be having the X-Men from a different universe come in, not our universe, though we do know that we have mutants. So I don't know that I'm 100% in that camp, but that seems to be the prevalent theory right now. I could see them Miles Moralesing it and going from the characters that we know and love in animation and bringing them directly into live action. Look, if that happens 2 times in a few years, I'm all here for it because these animated characters are great across the board.
I do think it would be amazing. I think my only thing is they've done so many, and don't get me wrong, X-Men have a lot of really important and iconic storylines. However, they've done so many already in the show. I feel like it limits them on the big screen.
Fair.
I'm thinking even down to like the Phoenix. I mean, I know it's been done already on the big screen.
Twice.
Yeah. But never done well, let's be real. And so to actually maybe see that one come to fruition, the Madeline Pryor stuff, even a lot of what we saw this season, I think there's so much that I'd love to see on the big screen. And I think if you bring this team directly in and you say, these are our X-Men, like they lived all this already. And we're not going to see that. That would be weird if it came around again. So that's kind of my only thing is I would like to see Marvel really do the X-Men stories well. And in order to do that, there's a lot that have already been told in this show that I don't want to have to avoid.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. I mean, we did talk about this being kind of like your primer for all things X-Men, so that is a good point. I guess I'm just, if they're gonna start to bring in stuff from the MCU, I'm just trying to start to think about like, how does this fit in? Maybe it is just another universe in the What If universe, and that's fine. We did have the Watcher. It's all good. But is there a more tangible connection between the two? Like, is that possible? And so, good point. I'm just tossing some stuff out there. You never know. I think Comic-Con this year, truly, like, not to get off topic, is going to be insane. I think with Agatha coming out, it's Deadpool weekend. We're going to get lots of trailers for the 4 movies coming out next year. I wouldn't be surprised if they unveil, maybe not a cast. I don't think they're there yet. But if they unveil that we have a date for X-Men, we know when they're coming, like, I think that's this year's move. Like, I really do.
Well, I mean, they're already looking at Coogler to possibly do it.
Is there anyone better?
Because they confirmed that he's going to come back for Black Panther 3, and they've been eyeing him for X-Men.
Just pick your best director and go. Period. The end. I'm fine with that.
So, just putting that out there since we're on that topic.
It's the all-star movie. Get the all-star director. I mean, has Coogler missed? I don't think so.
Well, right. So, I don't know. Just putting it out in the universe. But on to the last part of this that we can fit into this episode for the finale of season 1 of X-Men 97. My fave. Because I've been saying this crap. If you've been reading our blog, you have been with me on this forever. It feels like 5 weeks. In the comics, it doesn't quite happen like how it's happening. But in the comics, Gambit actually becomes one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen. He actually becomes, semi-ironically, the Horseman of Death. And he is with Apocalypse up until the team eventually takes down Apocalypse. And then he actually ends up with Mr. Sinister. So he kind of has quite the road. Rip to Mr. Sinister, by the way.
I know. I was like, okay, bye. I guess we're done now. No more kidnapping Jean for him.
Yeah, I was like, is this the end? Or is he just going to steal more mutant genes? Like, what's happening? But yeah, so TBD on where this could go in that direction. But I say all this to say, as soon as Gambit died, everybody who's in my Gambit group on Facebook, we were like, ah, and everybody was freaking out. And immediately somebody was like, guys, wait, this is what I think is going to happen. And then I started doing my digging and I went into this whole story, and I'm not going to bore you all with it, but essentially this has been the Gambit people's like thing ever since he's died. And they pretty much confirmed it in the mid-credit here, because obviously they don't ever actually show Apocalypse. We all know it's Apocalypse.
The voice is iconic.
Yeah, but also like, welcome back, like where you've been. Like I just like, he just shows up. I don't know where he's been. But he comes and you can see him digging through the rubble, and the thing that he picks up and dusts off is one of Gambit's iconic playing cards. And it's in that moment that they confirm Apocalypse is going to bring him back. He also has the ominous words of like, so many dead or something like that, or so much death. And you're just like, oh, I see what you did there. So I cannot wait. Another way of confirming again Apocalypse, even though we've been talking about the possibility of Apocalypse being season 2 for a little while now. So exciting. And also for me, so excited to get Gambit finally coming back in season 2 eventually. He also tries to kill Rogue like multiple times. Just an FYI. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there.
That tracks. When I was reading articles, reading up on him becoming the Horseman of Death and all of that good stuff, they were talking about what a better way to absolutely put the X-Men off kilter than to show them a friendly face who is no longer friendly, someone they are still mourning. It's going to be an emotional roller coaster. I think the other thing that I want to talk about really quick, because you mentioned, and we've talked about it a little bit as we've discussed the hints at season 2, Apocalypse is in everything. Everything comes back to Apocalypse. And so some of the articles I was reading were talking about maybe going into the Age of Apocalypse, where basically it's a totally different universe where Charles was never around. And we actually sort of got a hint of this in a past episode, but Charles was never around. Magneto, he was in charge. He was the guy, which we kind of got this season. So it kind of brings together a few different elements that we've already seen. But that could be really, really fun to see an entire Age of Apocalypse with Gambit as the Horseman of Death. And they're all out here dealing with the grief, but then also having to fight, someone that they love. And the articles were also talking about, what a perfect time to wipe Apocalypse off the map than to do it before he's even fully at strength and take him out in ancient Egypt. So there are so many opportunities here. I think season 2, we loved season 1, obviously, 10 out of 10, best show they've ever done, hands down, no question. I can see a path where they top it in season 2 easily.
I just think X-Men have the storylines that just allow for good TV and also good animated TV. I just feel like it works so well because everything's so wild, but like in animation, you don't have to think twice about it. You're just like, makes sense. Like how Jean just stole all of Mr. Sinister's mutant genes out of him and made him a little shriveled potato. Like, makes sense. I didn't question that. I just was like, yup, that works. You go, Jean. Like, you finally give it back to that man. And so I agree. I think we're on a path to continue topping it because they do have these awesome storylines and they do tie so easily into each other. The medium works so well here. It really does. It just tells the story in a way you just can't beat it. And I can't stop gushing about this show because it's been an amazing ride. I'm upset that I have to wait for season 2 because it's maybe next year, because theoretically it's like close to done is what it kind of sounded like. Maybe next year we get it. I don't want to even wait until next year though. I'm very sad, but I loved it. From start to finish, I want to watch it again. I probably will. It was so good.
Yeah. We've talked about this a million times. We are Avengers girls. Avengers are our bread and butter. But hi, X-Men. Welcome to the club.
I know. And it all started because we were binging the original series, but now here I am and I'm like, actually, I know so much. I honestly, from comic lore, I probably know more about the X-Men at this point than the Avengers. Because if you think about the amount of characters we had in the Avengers, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of mutants, but I'm thinking about the amount of characters that we've had to do research on individually that, yeah, they tie to each other because there's 9 million of them. Of course, they're going to tie to some other character. But then when you look at the X-Men, so much ties together a lot easier because they're written as a group a lot. And so it's so much easier to sit there and be like, oh, this leads to this and this leads to this. And oh, I get it. I see how this goes. And it just makes so much more sense that I genuinely feel like, as far as if I was ever asked to give a summary of the X-Men, I could do that a lot better than I could of the Avengers.
Yeah, I think that inner circle of like consistent characters for the X-Men really helps. Because
Yeah.
you're like, I can track Scott Summers from childhood through the children he has with Jean, versus like, okay, here's Captain America and he sort of semi-ties to Iron Man, who sort of semi-ties to the Hulk.
And then he dies 4 times, and then he's not Captain America because Captain America's somebody else now. Yeah. Which, don't get me wrong, that happens in X-Men, but like it's very confusing, especially people who wear the same mantle.
Yeah, like Black Panther too. It's another one.
Well, Cap.
Black Widow even.
Yeah, there's multiple Black Widows. There's multiple types of Iron Man. There's like so many people. I mean, look at the entire Hulk family. Let's be real. There's like 9 million Hulks out there by the end of it all. Oh, all the Marvels and Marvels.
I can't dash or no dash because those are different characters.
2 L's or only 1? Because those are also 2 different characters.
I can't. Every time I get into that universe, my brain shuts down and it's like, why are we doing this?
A great example, though, of people who wear essentially the same mantle, but yet there's about 8 different versions of them and they're all different people. But really quick, we have a confirmed Black Panther now in X-Men 97.
I know.
But it's not T'Challa, it's T'Chaka, which is interesting because Storm marries T'Challa.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, we don't know because he's wearing the mantle the whole time. And I think we've seen actually Black Panther before. We saw him in the original series. I think it was actually during the original Asteroid M. I think we saw him. But what I will say is we don't know how old T'Chaka is. And if you think about it, T'Chaka was king, but not Black Panther in Civil War. So it could be that he's getting to a place where he's going to hang up the Black Panther mantle, give it to T'Challa, remain king until he either dies or passes it along. I'm not sure if they have to die in Wakanda in order to pass along the crown. I'm just not sure what their politics are like. But he could remain king, but not Black Panther.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because the timeline's all off in the show.
Yeah.
Like, all our heroes are alive and thriving in the 90s, so it's definitely strange.
This has been a really great episode, a great series, the best we've gotten to cover in terms of TV by far since we've been a show, and this has been fun. We have some really exciting X-Men related episodes coming up that Katie's going to be able to tell you a little bit more about, but make sure that you're subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so that you get notified and know and can reach us as soon as we release a new episode every week for your listening pleasure. You can also check out our website, which is our central hub for everything related to the show. And as Katie mentioned a few times throughout this episode, it is also the spot where you can find our blog. There's a lot of really good supplemental research and additional resources, mainly Caitlin's research, for you to check out on the blog, which can help just fill in a little bit of gaps, things that we may not have gotten the chance to talk about or research before we recorded, definitely end up in the blog. So a really, really good supplement to our weekly episodes.
You guys can also give us a follow on Twitter at SisAssembledPod and Instagram and Threads at SistersAssembled. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel where we do our weekly Sister Scoop Marvel news segments, and also all our episodes are up there as well. So go ahead and find us at Sisters Assembled on there as well. And as T was kind of alluding to, we're not ending our X-Men coverage here. We are going right into some fan castings that we're going to be doing for the next few weeks. We're going to chunk them down to 3 characters for each episode, where we're going to bring to the table about 2 to 3 different people we think could be casted in it. We are also going to have friend of the pod and guest host every once in a while, Davis, on to join us for those. So we're super excited and we hope you guys are as well. And as always, right here, right now, Marvel just blew your mind. So let's talk about it.